the involvement of these outside powers into the region do make the situation much more vulnerable and volatile and unpredictable.
It helps build this vicious cycle.
When we ask Americans, do you view China as a military threat? Most people say no.
While it definitely makes things complicated, that's for sure, and make things worse, I think that's true, that the involvement of these outside powers into the region do make the situation much more vulnerable and volatile and unpredictable. What we need now is actually just to calmly and rationally finish the COC negotiation and put down a framework for the future conduct of behavior. And the COC negotiation does not have U.S. participation in it. It is between China and the ASEAN countries. That should proceed, and that should be completed as soon as possible.
U.S. intervention in the South China Sea to some extent complicates the whole issue because it helps build this vicious cycle. But I think we need to understand, how other people, other countries understand the consequences and the meaning of U.S. activities. When there are suspicions in other countries about U.S. activity, and you help build this vicious cycle, the more U.S. intervenes, other countries may feel compelled to react and respond with power, with assertive measures as well, or countermeasures. And also, to some extent, U.S. interventions in the South China Sea help embolden other claimant countries, which creates unnecessary results, and again help build this vicious cycle between China and some other claimant states in the South China Sea.
And politicians for 200 years in the United States have promised things in their campaign, but governing is very different than campaigning. So we see that today in the same way that we saw it in the 1780s and 1790s in our first campaigns. And so, yes, politicians make judgments about where are we going to get votes. Yes, being tough on China at the moment is popular with American voters, and it will get them votes. Hillary Clinton, during her time as Secretary of State and the famous pivot to Asia from the Obama administration, Donald Trump will be asked those questions, but that's not going to happen until probably late September or early October when the debates start. That clearly you can expect a lot more of the same under Hillary Clinton. She was part of this administration. She was part of the idea of a pivot to Asia. She has a history of making statements in support of the other Southeast Asian nations that are part of the tensions with China. So when we ask the average Americans, is China a threat? And Americans answer differently than comparing to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. When I was growing up in the 1970s and 1980s, I remember being absolutely fearful that the Soviet Union was going to drop nuclear bombs on us, and that was just a fear that we had as a society. I certainly had as a child. But when we ask Americans, do you view China as a military threat? Most people say no. But a pretty good percentage of Americans view China as friendly. They don't see them as a military threat.
从这个美方的立场来看呢，他的这个所有的目标其实都不是为了南海问题的解决，而是为了自身的利益。这样的目标不可能最后引到这个南海问题的和平解决，或是南海的这个和平和稳定，只能造成更多的问题。我们大家都知道一个很简单的逻辑：如果一个人或者一个国家，他的目的只是为了私利，为了一个小团体的利益，应该说更多人的利益、更多国家的利益会受损。这是一个非常容易被接受的这样的一个逻辑，也是一个真理。